Welcome back to the Hoopball YouTube channel. We've got an incredibly exciting video today. They're always exciting, but I know that this one, for a lot of you, is even more so because we are going to talk about something today that everyone loves to dig into on the precipice of their fantasy basketball drafts, and that is sleepers. Players in the NBA that, for whatever reason, are being slept on. Either they're not getting talked about enough, the general public isn't drafting them where they should. These are players that you can find after your first 100 picks that should have been taken in that range, who will give you top 100 value, at least in my estimation. Yahoo has recently reshuffled their draft board, perhaps for the final time before this fantasy basketball draft season. We've only got like about a week left until games begin. So, I really wanted to wait as long as I could to get this video out because a lot of you draft around this time. And this is, I think, going to be a very accurate reflection of your boards when you do, where all that value has now shifted to. This is sort of a follow-up video to one I released a few days ago, talking about steals and busts in the early and middle rounds of your fantasy basketball draft. If you've missed that one, go ahead and check it out up there. A lot of stuff that I think is still very relevant, even though Yahoo has moved some guys around on the board. This is, of course, a video that, as a lot of the videos on this channel, is focused on 9 category leagues. So some of the advice I may give may apply to your points league, maybe even more so in some circumstances, or even an 8-cat league. But again, a lot of my arguments that I'm going to present are from that 9-cat perspective. And of course, this is for Yahoo drafts as well, because a lot of the draft data that I'm going to be citing comes from that perspective as well. This is a Hoopball presentation. Hoop-ball.com is the website. Check it out in the description. Subscribe to this channel if you have not already. We have got tons of stuff on this channel for your draft if you want to check more of it out. Strategy videos, mock drafts, stuff like this. Some podcasts too, if you want to do some long form stuff. I mean, really, we cover a lot of bases here, and we'd really appreciate it if you showed some support through a like on this video, other videos, and a subscription. And hey, if this is your first time checking us out, you're definitely going to stick around for the regular season where I promise y'all, there's some really awesome stuff coming for that too. That I'm more excited for the regular season content than the stuff we've released so far, which is already pretty cool in my estimation. So enough preamble. Let's just get right into things here. We're going to talk, again, sleepers in 9 category leagues. Before we get into some of the 10 guys that I've highlighted for this video, there are a few names that I wanted to talk about, but given just recent public perception and how the board has been shifted on Yahoo's draft rankings, they don't really classify as sleepers anymore. Some of these names you'll be very familiar with. Jordan Poole at the top. This doesn't require a whole lot of introspection. Everyone's on to the Jordan Poole experience right now, and I'm a believer. This guy looks really good. I don't think the preseason stuff is fluky. It's just that now in fantasy drafts, he's not being slept on. It's as simple as that. Everyone is aware of him. I'd be surprised if he falls farther, into the deep 100 picks. I mean, it depends on how shallow your league is, but I mean, he's probably going around the top 100 range. He might even be going in the 80s and 90s. I'd prefer for him to stay in the 100 range personally, but if you're in on the hype, go for it. I'm not going to stop you. Al Horford and Evan Fournier and Kelly Olynyk, I'll group those 3 together. 3 vets that I've been talking a lot about on this channel, particularly Al Horford. And you can see behind me, I'm a big fan, both in real life, but in fantasy as well. I think he's in for a big year in Boston. Yahoo has recently adjusted him up to, I think, 82 on their board. So he's not really a sleeper anymore. I still think that he's a valuable pick there if you're curious. If you were to get him at 82 with your 80th pick or something, I still think that he'll give you fantasy value in 9-cat leagues this year. And similar to Fournier and Olynyk, I think they've got very solid roles in their new spots. They were outside the top 100 on Yahoo's board for a while. Now they're both ranked within it, and that's all fair positioning for them. And there's still guys I'd consider taking depending on how they fit my build. And then the last guy is Jaden McDaniels, who is not being slept on either anymore, just in terms of public perception. A lot of people are excited about this guy. I am too. I mean, just from a reality perspective, I think he has all the tools to be one of the next great defensive stars in the NBA. I don't know if it's going to be this season. I'm not sure if he's a top 100 guy for sure, but I wouldn't call him a sleeper anymore. And he's someone that I would consider drafting, but would hope that he falls a little farther than his current ADP on Yahoo. So these are the guys that, not going to cover too much in depth today. Instead, here are 10 names that are currently undervalued that you should really consider for your drafts, depending on how they fit your build or not. I don't know. Maybe you should take them all. Let's start with the first name here. And he's gotten some hype, but I think that he is still undervalued. And I'm talking about Daniel Gafford, the presumptive starting center for the Washington Wizards this season. Take a look at the numbers down below. After he was traded to Washington last trade deadline, he put up some really impressive numbers in limited minutes: 10 points per game, almost 6 boards, 1.8 blocks, which is really a sky high figure in terms of fantasy. Not listed here is his 65% field goal percentage as well. I mean, really traditional center stats, but he was terrific at them. And the fact that he did this in less than 18 minutes a game should be very encouraging to, I don't know, anyone who has any sort of expectations for him this season. He's going to start at center to begin the year. And even when Thomas Bryant returns from injury, I still think there's a good chance that he holds that starting job. And even if he doesn't, and a reminder, Montrezl Harrell's in town too. I think down the road, those three just end up splitting the center minutes. But look, Scott Brooks isn't around anymore. I think Gafford is going to get first crack at this job. And even if he's only playing 18 minutes a night, those numbers that you're looking at right now would be top 100 value where he's getting drafted right now. I think that's his floor, frankly. And I think what makes him particularly interesting is that everyone talks about how centers really start drying up fast in the middle rounds of drafts. And it's true. Centers go off the board very quickly. This is your answer. This is your answer right here. Daniel Gafford is going to be available after those first 100 picks. And there are guys that are going to go ahead of him that he'll finish above in 9 category leagues. I feel pretty good about that. He is, again, he should have a little more momentum. He's got an ADP of 108, so it's not like he's falling too far outside the top 100 picks. But he is someone that I think can exceed value at that spot. So definitely someone to check out if you need that field goal percentage bump, those blocks numbers, decent rebounding. He's going to satisfy a lot, and I think that he's going to hold on to that job, or at least some semblance of a consistent 18-minute role per night at least, to be a fantasy value this year. So that's Gafford. Let's move on to the next name on this list, and they're all in order of their current ADP on Yahoo. Sadiq Bey, presumptive starting small forward for the Detroit Pistons, and he's not really like a name that people are sleeping on. People know who he is, and there's some excitement about him, but I think there should be a little bit more. ADP right now of 115. The numbers that you're looking at down below are his splits from when he started for the Pistons last year. And, if you didn't follow along, Pistons had, their lineups were all over the place. Sadiq Bey didn't really become their consistent starter until, with a month left in the season. But he had spot starts throughout the year. And these numbers are really impressive to me. 13.5 points per game, almost 3 triples, about 5 boards, nearly a steal per game. What you're looking at right there, he was a top 110 player in 9 category leagues, which is right around where his ADP is right now. The reason that I think he's going to take a leap forward this year is, first of all, that field goal percentage that he's sporting, sub 40, it's hard to go lower than that. I would assume that in his sophomore season, that goes up. And really, it doesn't take a lot of growth in that category. You get him up to 42%. I think that's a top 100 player with those numbers that you're looking at. I think it's a positive that he is going to have Killian Hayes and Cade Cunningham in the starting lineup with him. Look, Sadiq Bey didn't really have much at all in the form of a consistent starting point guard last year. For a guy who relies so much on spot-up threes, and that's not the only way he gets it done offensively, but it's a big part of his game, he needs guys to get him the ball. So the fact that there are more playmakers, not to mention, Jeremy Grant and Kelly Olynyk, who are both capable passers as well, I think that there is a lot of optimism that his percentages go up. He might, the 11 shots per game is plenty for him. He could get to about 3 threes per game. If he gets that steals number to about 1.1, I think that's an easy target for him to hit, top 100 guy. He's someone that I'm definitely targeting if I need threes late. He's looked pretty good in the preseason to me. It looks like he's also taken some steps forward as a playmaker himself. I don't think that'll necessarily translate to a bump in assists, but he's a talented dude. And he's going to be starting all year. And he just has better guys around him that suit his game better. So I'm expecting a jump. I think that this is a little too low for him. I like what I see from Sadiq Bey and the young Pistons in general. Next guy we have on the board here, and this is one that was sort of a late addition for me because I was pretty much convinced that Thaddeus Young was not going to be a member of the San Antonio Spurs. They were 2 guys over their roster limit, and it seemed like Young was a solid candidate to get traded because, I mean, San Antonio, they have Keldon Johnson at that power forward spot. They signed Doug McDermott and Zach Collins in the offseason. They among some other forwards, like they acquired Thaddeus Young as sort of just kind of a throw-in while Chicago was moving pieces around. It just didn't seem like he was a part of their plan. Well, it seems like he is now actually going to play for them this year. And it seems like he's a solid trade candidate as well. But let's be honest, Thad Young doesn't need a lot of playing time to be an effective fantasy player. You can look right down there. He was a top 75 player in 9-cat last year off of totals. And he only did that in 24 minutes a night, a number that I think is more than reasonable for him to hit in San Antonio. He is someone that Popovich is really going to just love employing just as a solid playmaker, a good and smart defender, a reliable veteran, as someone who can play both with and behind Keldon Johnson. I think that he's going to have avenues to play while he's a Spur. And if he gets traded, perhaps he will continue to do that. But with an ADP of 123, he's someone that you could draft early on and get some, I'd say, some positive results value-wise. Again, I was not really thinking about him much. I just assumed that he was just either going to sit out and get traded. But San Antonio's figured, hey, you know what? You're a good player. Let's play you some. And that's more than justifiable. So, yeah, a name that people are definitely not going to think much about, but he is someone who definitely deserves some consideration. I mean, the ADP is not wildly out of whack, but Thad Young could do some top 100 stuff if he's given enough playing time with the Spurs this season. Another guy here from the best team in the NBA, the Atlanta Hawks, of course, DeAndre Hunter. I spread Hawks propaganda. I have a platform and I'm going to do that. So apologies if you just can't stand that, but I'm going to do it. DeAndre Hunter had an incredible start to the season last year. In his 18 games before he went down with a right meniscus injury, Hunter was a top 55 player in 9 category leagues. Incredible percentages from the floor. He was easily Atlanta's second best player to that point of the year. He had developed an ability to create off the dribble, something that is, I think, very important to sustaining value with all of the Hawks' depth this coming season. He's going to be the starting small forward. He is the best perimeter defender on the team. And my rule, this is a rule that's important, I think, important for a lot of people to employ. If you are good at defense, if you are a really valuable defensive player in the NBA, you're going to get minutes. I know that Kevin Huerter and Cam Reddish, are behind him and are going to be competing for minutes, as is Bogdan Bogdanovic. But Hunter, of those 4, to me, as long as he's healthy, and that is sort of the big question mark that you need to consider if you want to draft him. But if he's healthy, I think he's going to play the most of those 4. He just does so much for this team. He's an incredibly important defender, an incredibly important offensive option, as it turns out. I don't know if he's going to average 17 points per game on the season. 50% field goal percentage seems pretty unsustainable. But this is a top 55 guy. I really feel that he has the capacity to be better than where he's getting drafted right now at the 124 range. Again, you are only shying away from DeAndre Hunter if you think that knee injury that he's been fighting through in the preseason continues to hurt him and hobble him throughout the year. But as far as the depth concerns on Atlanta go, Hunter is someone who I think gets to be above that fray because of what he brings just in terms of intangibles as a defender, as a self-creator on offense, as someone who can play some small ball 4. He does too many valuable things to not get to close to 30 minutes a night. So I'm all in on DeAndre Hunter as a pick as a 9th round pick. Go for it. He might have the highest ceiling of any of the guys I talk about tonight, and that is not my Hawks bias, only a little bit. Let's go to the next guy here. Another guy I'm very high on, and if you watch videos on this channel, you've heard me talk about him before. But Jayshawn Tate is getting drafted around the same range as Hunter right now, an ADP of 127. I presume that he is going to be the starting small forward for the Rockets. I don't think that's been confirmed, but it seems like he is the leading candidate. And even if he doesn't start, he is going to be someone who plays a lot of minutes because of the same rationale I just gave you about DeAndre Hunter. Jayshawn Tate's a good defender. And more than that, Jayshawn Tate's just a versatile player. You know, this team doesn't have a natural point guard. They're going to be rolling Kevin Porter Jr. out there at that spot. Jayshawn Tate has proven himself to be a capable ball handler and a good secondary creator. So he's someone that can help Porter Jr. in that capacity. Again, defensively, he's solid. He can play multiple positions. I love his stat set for fantasy, like really high steals numbers, good rebounding and field goal percentage from a guard-eligible player. Can hit you some threes, can get you some assists. He does a whole lot for your team. And at this range here, if he is starting or playing 28 minutes a night, easy top 100 player in my mind. I'm serious, easy. I think that this is just, again, he can satisfy a lot of needs, a really interesting guy in certain punt builds. I don't know. I'm very high on him. I've given a lot. You should check out a video that I did breaking down the John Wall news from about a month ago when that happened. I went real in depth on Jayshawn Tate. If you want to learn more about how high I am in that capacity, you should check that video out as well. But definitely still a sleeper, in my opinion. This is too low of an ADP for him. And I think that he has a real shot at top 100 value on the season. Let's talk about another guy here who I was probably going to leave off of this video, but I've seen some pretty positive reports about that severe ankle injury that he suffered a few weeks ago. And this is Patrick Williams, the presumptive starting power forward for the Chicago Bulls. Patrick Williams is going to play a lot of minutes this year, provided that that ankle is healthy. And I think it's important that you, before you draft Patty Will, to make sure that he is progressing towards, if not being available on opening night, to be available a couple of games after that. You can take a look at what I have there underneath on that screen right there. This is per Cleaning the Glass. When you break down the minutes that he played positionally last year, he's played half of his minutes at small forward and half at power forward. He's going to be their power forward pretty much exclusively this year, just because Chicago has a lot more depth on the wing than they do at the four. He might not play all of his minutes there, but I'd be shocked if it's anything less than 65%, maybe 70% of his minutes at that spot. And it speaks for itself. His rebound rate goes up. His three-point percentage rate goes up, mostly because he's hitting corner threes, and he's a very efficient corner three-point percentage guy. Steal rates are higher. The block rates kind of fluctuate a little bit. He kind of gets into foul trouble, so he might avoid those in some capacity. But this is a guy who can compile both defensive stats. And if he takes a leap forward in rebounds and three-pointers this year, there's an avenue where he's a top 100 guy. I think he's riddled with potential. Chicago needs him. Again, I'm going back 3 guys in a row here. He is their best defender. He will find time on the floor because of that. He is also, it just happens to be their best asset just in terms of, like, you know, youth and potential. Patrick Williams, as long as he's healthy, has a large role to play this year. And if you're looking for a guy who can give you a little bit of everything outside of, I don't know, assists and free throw percentage, he's a very solid target in that range. He, DeAndre Hunter, and Jayshawn Tate are all kind of grouped together, and they all offer different things statistically, but I think they are 3 young guys who deserve a little more attention than they've been given so far. Next guy on the list is not really a young guy, but he is a pretty popular name. NBA, Milwaukee's own Bobby Portis. I've also talked about Portis on this channel, and I'm going to continue to hype him up here. This is someone that I feel very confident about, probably as confident as anyone on this list, maybe say for one guy later on, that he's going to beat this ADP. Almost certainly. He's getting drafted at 135 right now. First off, he was a top 110 player last year in just 20 minutes a night. Portis does a lot of things for this Bucks team as someone who just fits well next to Giannis, an energy injection off the bench, good rebounder, can score as a face-up scorer. He can hit, you know, shots from a lot of different places on the floor. I think he's going to play a lot more this year. Maybe not like starters level minutes, but 20 minutes is a pretty low number. And he's backing up Brook Lopez, the oldest player on this team, who is 2 months off of an NBA Finals run where he played a lot. That's a guy who, if he's not getting load managed this year, which I think he will, he's definitely going to see a reduction in minutes, and that will directly benefit Portis. I would be shocked if he plays 20 minutes a game again this season. I could see 22 to 24, and he's a per-minute monster. Like, this is a guy that you give him more time on the floor, he will continue to compile stats. And if he was already 110 in 9 category leagues last season in just 20.8 minutes per night, you throw 2 to 4 more on top of that, that's all he'll need to scoot into the top 100. Again, NBA teams that come off of finals runs, especially one that was as recent as this NBA finals were, they're going to need some help from their bench. And Bobby Portis is their best player off that bench, and he is backing up the oldest player on the team. There's just so much that is going right for him, this kind of scenario. I can't emphasize this enough. I think this is a lock. I think he is a lock to beat this ADP, and I really think that he could be a top 100 player this season. So definitely someone you could sneak in even farther than the 9th round. You could probably grab him with your 10th or 11th round pick, and that's just a lot of appealing value from that spot. Another name that is sort of an older guy and probably not a popular name for a sleeper, and I've gotten some pushback on this one too, but I'm kind of convinced that Marcus Morris is going to be the second best Clipper from a fantasy basketball perspective this season. ADP of 140.7 was around, which is right where he kind of ranked last season in 9 category leagues, which is already a good sign because he's taking a step forward this year. Kawhi Leonard's not playing. Morris is going to average probably 2 to 3 more shots per game. He is debatably the second best offensive player behind Paul George on this team. You could say Reggie Jackson, perhaps, and I wouldn't argue that. But Morris is going to have the ball in his hands a lot more often this season. And there's precedent of him being a productive fantasy player, borderline top 100 guy when he's getting around 13 shots per game. Not to mention, by the way, he only averaged 4 rebounds a night last year. The Clippers found a lot of success playing him as a small ball center in the playoffs. And that's a strategy that they're going to employ again heading into this season. I think that those rebounding numbers are going to go up. The shots are definitely going to go up. By the way, Paul George, if you think he's going to play all 82 games, you got another thing coming. When he rests, this guy becomes probably the primary option for the Clippers. He could be someone who every now and then he could win you a week with 20 points a night and 3 to 4 threes. Like he's going to have a pretty large role offensively, health permitting this season. I think that you are of no risk. There's no risk to you to take him where he's going right now. You could get him with the last pick of your draft, and he could be a guy that you hold on to all season as a solid source of points, threes, decent percentages. Morris, again, not a popular name, and I get it. His reputation in a lot of ways precedes him as well, as did Bobby Portis, by the way. A lot of people were kind of out on Portis last year because they weren't fans of him personally. I get that. Marcus Morris, though, he's going to be an important part of what the Clippers do this season. I have to imagine. So, again, he was top 140 last year, and that's where he's getting drafted now. You have nothing to lose by taking him, and I guarantee that he'll exceed some expectations if you grab him at that spot. I'm about to go 3 for 3 on vets here for the sleeper pick, but this is another guy who, given the current context of his team, is going to play a ton this year, at least for the first part, and that's Terrence Ross. He, remember, is the lone holdover from the Magic's overhaul at the trade deadline. He is the captain now. Terrence Ross, they didn't play him all that much after the deadline for obvious reasons. They were in tank mode. He had some injury concerns. There was no reason to really put him out there. But let's be frank. The Magic don't really have a crystal clear starting small forward. They could roll with Chuma Okeke out there, which I'm a fan of Okeke and think he'll be a top 100 player this year. Another sleeper candidate, by the way, but I don't think I've included him on the list. But Ross, he is one of the only guys on this team that can get his own shot. He's a reliable 3-point shooter. He's not the world's greatest defender, but he's capable. He's going to soak up plenty of minutes to start this season. The Magic are going to trade him eventually, but it's going to take a little time. He's got a very tradable contract. There's no downside for them playing him early on. I mean, if they do, he's been a top 100 player on less shots than he's going to see in this unit in the past. Even if he sees the same amount of shots, he's been a top 100 player, or at least borderline, just because of 3-point volume and his propensity to get you a little bit of steals here and there. But I think that he's going to have a decently high usage role to start the year, especially with Jalen Suggs kind of learning the NBA game. It'd be very helpful for Suggs to have a guy like Terrence Ross, who's a reliable offensive option at the wing. So Ross is a guy that you could grab frankly, he might go undrafted in most of your leagues. You could pick him up, and he could give you a lot of solid scoring numbers, be a top 100 guy for the first couple months of the season. Maybe you flip him in a trade, maybe get some juice some more value out of him. I just don't see him not playing to start the year. And at this ADP here, it just seems ridiculous to me that he's going to – that's not where his value is. He hasn't been that kind of player in years. There's just a lot pointing to him being involved with the Magic early on, especially these young guys trying to learn the ropes. He's going to be an important piece, and I think he's going to embrace that role too. So, again, not an exciting pick like Marcus Morris. I mean, well, people like Terrence Ross, unlike Marcus, but he's not generating a lot of excitement. He's probably going undrafted in the majority of your leagues. I think there's a very compelling case to say that he's a top 100 player for the first half of the season, and you have nothing to lose by taking him with your last pick. One more guy I want to talk about as a definitive sleeper, and it's kind of crazy to me that I'm bringing him up because if you follow fantasy basketball analysts on Twitter, if you listen to certain podcasts or you read a lot of information, by no means is this guy a sleeper in that world. This is someone that I've been talking about personally for years as a breakout candidate, and everyone is on him too. But the thing is, DeAnthony Melton is not getting drafted where he should. He has an ADP of 145 on Yahoo, and granted, they have moved him up on the rankings board, I think, to within those first 110 picks. So he's probably going to go sooner than this a lot of the time. But the fact that he's even ranked outside the top 100 to me is still, there's still value there. He is being slept on these ranked lists. This is a guy who, from everything I've seen in the preseason, is going to have a larger role this year than he has had in years past. They traded Grayson Allen, who was the starting shooting guard last season for a lot of, pretty much the entire year when he wasn't hurt. Melton was relegated to competing with Tyus Jones and John Conchar for those backup guard minutes. And everyone at this point kind of gets that Melton is debatably the second best guard on this team behind John Morant. Maybe Desmond Bane is better. Desmond Bane's certainly a better shooter than DeAnthony Melton, but Melton's not. He's pretty good in that regard too. His three-point shot has looked fantastic in the preseason. These numbers down below are what his averages were in these disjointed games that he played last season, where he exceeded 20 minutes a night. I think he exceeds 20 minutes a night this year. I really do. I'm for those of you who are wise to the DeAnthony Melton conversation and have heard people like me talk about him before, you're probably rolling your eyes a little bit, but they have cleared out bodies for him to play. He is going to play more this season. And these numbers that you're looking at, nearly 13 points a game, 2 threes, 4 rebounds, 3.5 assists, a steal and a half per game. I haven't even shown you the percentages, which were above 50 and 80 in this game, in these like 20 game sample size that I'm referencing here. That's like top 60 in 9 category leagues. I promise you, this guy is going to blast through the top 100 rankings this year. And I think that you would be absolutely crushing it to take him anywhere after those first 100 picks. I'd take him in the 9th round, frankly. He'd be my first guy I'd target here. He's the last guy I'm talking about, maybe because you saved the best for last, but he has the lowest ADP of all these other guys that I just talked about. It's ridiculous. People are not, as much as we talk about DeAnthony Melton, the public has not caught up to him yet. Don't be that guy. Be the guy that takes DeAnthony Melton this year. He is going to exceed expectations. He is going to be someone that you're going to want to roster all season long. He is a very valuable part of Memphis's attack. And I have to imagine that Taylor Jenkins is going to play him more than he has in years past. That's just, but if I'm wrong, you can come at me, tell me I'm wrong. I'm sorry that I wasted your 9th round pick. I promise you, though, this is not going to be a wasted pick. He is someone who you should be targeting. Simple as that. Before we wrap things up here, I have sort of a list of other names I just want to touch on, sort of rapid fire of, I think also sleepers, but I just don't feel as confident in them as I have these other players that I've mentioned tonight. Let's start at the top here. Matisse Thybulle, someone I absolutely would have included on this list if it weren't for a couple of things. One, he has this shoulder injury that's going to keep him out for a few weeks to start the season, so that's not encouraging. But Ben Simmons, as of recording this video, October 12th, mysteriously out of nowhere showed up to the Sixers training facility last night, and it appears, not positive, but it appears that he is going to be playing for Philadelphia to start off the season. And the reason I was really high on Thibault as a sleeper, and look, he could still break out later this season when Simmons is gone, but I felt that a Ben Simmons trade would have opened up a lot of playing time for Thibault just because you don't have to worry about the spacing issues between those two. And Thibault will be able to make up a lot of that elite level perimeter defense that you lose in Simmons, because Thibault in his own right is one of the best individual defenders in the NBA. A steals and blocks machine in fantasy basketball. I'm probably not as high on drafting him. I mean, if you want to take him with your last pick, I think that's fine. But I want to wait until Ben Simmons is out of the picture in Philly before he can really break out. Joe Harris is a name that he might have more name recognition than anyone I've talked about on here. He is someone who's not a sleeper in that respect, but he's getting drafted way, way too low. He was a top 100 player last season. As of this recording right now, Kyrie Irving is not going to be playing for the Brooklyn Nets until, something happens either with the state laws about vaccination requirements or he gets vaccinated. So he's going to get plenty of shot opportunities. He's a really just reliable 3 points and percentages guy. He's going below Duncan Robinson, who has more name recognition, and Harris is just better than in real life and in fantasy. He's just going too low. He's probably going to be a top 100 player again this year. And if you need threes, he's as reliable an option as you can find. Again, I think ADP in the 130s in Yahoo drafts. That's easy. Next guy, Daniel Tice. Everyone's interested in Alperen Şengün. You'll notice I didn't mention the Turkish rookie in this video because he's not a sleeper. People are wise to the hype around this guy. But here's the thing. He's not starting to start the year. I think that Tice is going to be their starting center. And Tice, he showed it in his stops in Chicago. He showed it in stretches in Boston when he started there at center. He is someone who will get you enough block shots, boards, threes, and decent percentages to be a top 100 guy when he's playing. And I think that Şengün is going to surpass him at some point, but they signed Tice for a reason. The Rockets signed Tice, I think, on the second day of free agency. It might have even been the first. That's a priority signing. They don't bring a guy in to just have him come off the bench. Maybe they do eventually. But I think that his role is more important than backing up and mentoring Şengün. I think that he is an important defensive piece for this team next to Christian Wood. He's a good screener, and that's going to be helpful to Jalen Green and Kevin Porter Jr. He's going to be out there, and he's going to accumulate stats for you when he does. So not an exciting name, but easy guy to target if you want some big man stats at the very end of your draft and will be productive for you, at least in the first part of the season. Terrence Mann is another name that a lot of hype, and I love Terrence Mann. It just from like a reality perspective, I'm on the fence on what the fantasy outlook will be for him in 9-cat leagues this year. Someone that's fine to take a flyer on because he will play a lot for the Clippers, whether he starts or not. I think he starts the year coming off the bench for them. But, he's got some upside as a scorer, secondary assist guy, some steals here and there. Just not my favorite name, not as much as I liked the other guys I talked a little more in depth about, so I left him here. Scotty Barnes, rookie for the Raptors, is getting a lot of buzz. I'm not super in tuned with what he looks like in a non-preseason game, but the preseason stuff has just been phenomenal. Rebounds, assists, steals, blocks. He is going to be sort of a multi-tooled player. Pascal Siakam might be weeks away from making his season debut, which means that he will likely be starting alongside OG Anunoby in that front court. And as far as rookies go, he's probably worthy of a pick after those first 100, probably more so than any other rookie on the board, in my estimation. He just does a whole lot. Good out-of-position stats guy, just someone that I would keep in mind. Mo Bamba is another name that's generating a lot of hype right now, and I get it. I might be in the minority here, but I'm not buying this notion that the Magic are going to roll out lineups with him and Wendell Carter Jr. on the floor at the same time. I just don't see that working. They'll probably do it. But, I mean, look, here's the deal with Bamba. He needs to just 20 minutes a night, and he'll be a shot-blocking machine. He'll give you a lot of rebounds and some threes in there, a really appealing player. But I just think that Wendell Carter Jr. is going to win that center battle between the two. Mo Bamba, for all of his tools and the eye-popping stats, The reality is he's yet to play a meaningful role in the NBA because he makes a lot of mistakes on the defensive end. He's just a liability despite all the tools. He poor positioning, bad, weird tendencies. Just, and granted, maybe it was just a situation where he was in the doghouse for Clifford, Coach Clifford, who's now out. Mosley is now the head coach in Orlando, so it's a whole new set of circumstances. I could be wrong on this one, but I personally am not all the way in on the Bamba hype. So I think that he's certainly worth a pick after the first 100 picks. I'm not saying that, I'm not trying to dissuade you. I just didn't believe in him, in his fantasy prospects enough to include him earlier in this video. Malachi Flynn is another guy that I'm very interested in Toronto. Had some really eye-popping stat lines last season, filling in for Kyle Lowry and Fred VanVleet. I think he's in that top 3 guard rotation in Toronto behind VanVleet and Gary Trent Jr. and Scotty Barnes, depending on when Siakam comes back. I think Barnes can play some of that too as well. But Flynn is the backup point guard, and he can play next to Gary Trent Jr. He can play next to Fred VanVleet. I just kind of think that he's going to find his way onto the floor more consistently this year. And he has a DeAnthony Melton-like game. He's not nearly as efficient as Melton is, but he has a pretty appealing upside, and someone that you probably don't even have to draft. It's more the type of situation that you put him on your watch list and he just goes gangbusters to start the season, and then you pick him up. He's on my radar. I like him a lot more in this season. I think he's going to play a larger role. Steven Adams and Desmond Bane, I'm going to end it on these two here. I think they're going to start for Memphis. With Adams, he could be a top 100 guy this year. I think that he fits. He's a better fit in Memphis's system than he was in New Orleans. I think that he works well playing off of Ja Morant. And, he's still 28. People kind of write Adams off because he had 2 years in a row where he looked pretty old and looked kind of like ancient by modern NBA standards. But he's a good passer. He's a smart defender. And he is going to step into a role where he's going to be playing next to Jaren Jackson Jr., not the world, by like leagues and bounds, a worse rebounder than Zion Williamson. I think we're going to see Adams return to much higher rebounding numbers this year. I probably should have included him in the list earlier. I think that he has a good shot at top 100 value. I'd say the concerns might be how many center minutes they want to give to Jaren Jackson Jr. and whether or not Brandon Clark can take another step up this year. There's a lot of depth in that front court in Memphis, and Adams isn't a part of their long-term plans, but I think he's going to start, and he's going to be pretty good for them. And Desmond Bane is definitely going to start for them. Maybe not definitely, because they also have a lot of depth at the wings and guard spots, but he's been unbelievable in the preseason. 3-point machine. He's an awesome player to watch. He doesn't have a fantasy-friendly game yet. Not in 9-cat leagues. He's just a 3-point guy. That's kind of it. And that's just why I didn't put him there, because there needs to be more than just being a terrific 3-point shooter to be a valuable 9-category leagues player. So he's going to play a lot, probably play more minutes than Melton, but Melton really just needs 20. I'll say it again. Melton just needs 20. Taylor Jenkins, if you're listening to me, man, give that man 20 minutes a night, please. We're all begging you. We would love to see it happen. I think it will. But yeah, so that is my list, everyone. I hope that you have found some valuable information from this video. Let me know in the comments if you agree or disagree, a name that you want to talk about that I didn't bring up. I'm happy to answer more questions in that capacity. Please subscribe to the channel and drop a like on this video if you appreciate what you saw and heard. And we will be back with a few more videos this week in the lead up to your drafts. Might even do a little live Q&A. We'll see. Depends on how timing works out on my end. But yeah, we've got a lot of great stuff in the works here. Again, drop a like and subscribe, everyone. Good luck with your drafts. If you're watching this like right before, I hope it goes well. And we'll check in with you next time.